It was the summer of 2019. In a remote rural area of Vermont, Emily, a recently graduated college student, was under heavy stress after intense exam periods, and moreover, she was anxious about her uncertain career future. She decided to spend her summer vacation at her grandmother's old house, in a strange, secluded place she had never set foot in. This house, built in the 1950s, looked quite ordinary. A bit rundown with faded paint and an overgrown garden, but it possessed a strange antique, silent charm. When Emily arrived, a musty smell, mixed with the scent of old wood and rotting leaves, assailed her nostrils. The weak summer sunlight filtered through the ancient trees surrounding it, just enough to illuminate the dust motes floating in the air, creating a gloomy, eerily silent scene. She dragged her suitcase inside, the wheels screeching on the wooden floor, breaking the deafening silence of the house. Emily was an introverted person, prone to anxiety, and this place, while offering an initial sense of peace, also made her feel strangely isolated, as if she was cut off from the outside world. She began cleaning and rearranging her belongings, trying to make the old house feel more cozy. But from the very first days, she felt something was off. The feeling of being watched clung to her, especially when she was alone in the living room at night. She tried to dismiss the thought, but an inexplicable shiver crept into her mind, as if someone was standing right behind her, observing her every move. The first few days passed in terrifying silence. Emily spent her time reading, writing, trying to find inspiration. But then, strange things began to appear, very small, very subtle, but enough to catch her attention. Occasionally, when she was sitting alone in the living room, she would hear very faint whispers, like someone talking in another room. But when she went to check, everything was silent. Once, she left her favorite necklace on the dressing table, but when she returned, it was neatly placed on the windowsill. Emily told herself it was just her absent-mindedness, or that the house was too old, causing strange sounds and phenomena. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger within her, especially when night fell. An unusual chill often enveloped the house. Sometimes she felt the temperature drop suddenly at certain points, as if an invisible cold draft was passing through. Strange dreams also began to haunt her, repeating vague images of a woman with long hair, her face obscured, standing silently in the corner of the room, staring at her. She woke up, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding, and it took a long time for her to fall back asleep. She began to doubt herself, whether she was simply too stressed, or if the house was truly haunted. The initial signs gradually became clearer and more terrifying. Emily began to frequently see dark shadows flitting past the corner of her eye, especially when she walked down the dark hallway, or when she was alone in the living room. She would spin around, but there was nothing, just the deafening silence and the old walls. Once, she was making coffee in the kitchen, when she suddenly heard a very clear whisper, as if someone was calling her name. "Emily?" She dropped the mug, her heart pounding like a drum. She looked around. There was no one, only the wind whistling through the slightly open window. Objects in the house also began to move inexplicably. A vase placed on the dining table suddenly shattered to the floor, without any reason. Emily stood frozen, looking at the broken glass, and felt a chill run down her spine. She began to sleep very little. The terrifying dreams continued to torment her, becoming clearer and clearer. She clearly saw the face of the woman in her dreams, black, lifeless eyes, and a grotesque, distorted smile. She began to doubt herself, and doubt everything she was experiencing. The tension reached its peak when Emily began to see even more terrifying things. One evening, as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, she suddenly saw a reflection behind her. It was the woman from her dreams, with long, dark hair hanging loose, a pale face, and deep, hollow eyes staring at her through the mirror. Emily screamed in terror, spinning around, but there was nothing. Only the old mirror, reflecting her own pale, terrified face. She rushed out of the bathroom, trembling uncontrollably, her heart racing. She tried to calm herself down, telling herself it was just an illusion, due to her exhaustion and stress. But the fear had already taken root in her mind. She began to avoid looking in mirrors, avoiding the dark corners of the house, and trying not to be alone for too long. She turned on all the lights in the house, but the light seemed unable to dispel the invisible darkness that enveloped the house. She felt the house was turning into a trap, and she was stuck inside. The fear prompted Emily to investigate the house's history. She recalled her grandmother once mentioning an old trunk in the attic, containing family keepsakes. She decided to go up to the attic, a place she usually avoided due to its gloomy appearance. The smell of dust and dampness assailed her nostrils when she opened the attic door. The faint light from the small window was just enough to illuminate the old objects, covered in cobwebs. Emily found the old wooden trunk, covered in dust. She opened it. Inside were yellowed photographs, old clothes, and a faded leather-bound journal. The journal was written in delicate handwriting, by a woman named Mary, the first owner of this house. Mary had lived here in the 1950s, and she had a young daughter named Lily, who was very ill. The last journal entries described Mary's despair when Lily passed away, and how she tried everything to bring her daughter back, even resorting to dark magic rituals. The very last page had only one sentence written in shaky handwriting. "Lily, you will never leave me. I will keep you here forever." As Emily read that, a chilling cold ran down her spine, and she felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing her throat. She realized that the haunting spirit of this house was not Mary, but Lily, the trapped child, held back by her mother's grief. The horror reached its peak when Emily returned to her bedroom. She felt the room become unusually cold, and a strange sweet scent, like lilies, wafted through the air. She looked around, and saw the old closet door slightly ajar. Emily knew she had closed it tightly before going up to the attic. She approached the door, and suddenly heard a faint giggle, like a child's laughter, coming from inside the closet. Emily's hair stood on end, her heart pounding like a drum. She slowly opened the closet door wider, and saw nothing but a dark, empty space inside. But the giggling continued, and she felt an icy cold breath on her face, as if a child was standing right in front of her. "Mommy," a faint child's voice echoed, deep, haunting, yet with a strange familiarity. Emily backed away, collapsing to the floor. She clearly saw a small, blurred figure, standing in the closet, black, lifeless eyes staring straight at her. It was Lily, the spirit of the child trying to communicate, or worse, trying to pull her into its world. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out, as if an invisible hand was squeezing her throat. She felt a chilling current pass through her body, as if something was trying to possess her, to enter her. Emily woke up, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, but her eyes were still filled with panic. She didn't know if it was a dream or reality, but the obsession with Lily and Mary had deeply embedded itself in her mind, unable to be erased. She couldn't stay in that house for another second. She quickly packed her belongings, leaving behind everything she couldn't carry, rushing out of the house without a single glance back. Emily left Vermont. She moved to another city, trying to start a new life. But no matter where she was, the fear still clung to her. She couldn't sleep soundly. The dreams of Lily, of her grandmother's old house, and of the mother's curse tormented her every night. Lily's small face with lifeless eyes kept appearing in her mind. She always felt as if someone was watching her, no matter where she was. Every time night fell, she felt an icy chill envelop her, and the faint giggling of a child kept echoing in her ears. That terrifying summer vacation had turned into an eternal haunting in Emily's life. She knew that, no matter where she went, Lily's spirit would always be there. A child ghost trapped by her mother's desperate love, waiting for the next victim. And perhaps, she would forever be a part of that terrifying story. It was the summer of 2020. In a secluded suburban area of Colorado, Nathan, an energetic university student, was always seeking new adventures, mysterious places to explore. He was a thrill seeker, always wanting to challenge himself, and his main passion was exploring abandoned houses, places he believed held untold stories. His great-grandfather's old house, nestled deep in the woods, was the ideal destination for this year's summer vacation. It had been abandoned for over 50 years. Looked ordinary, a bit rundown, but it had its own gloomy, mysterious charm. When Nathan arrived, a musty smell, mixed with the scent of rotting wood and dry leaves, assailed his nostrils. Tall, ancient trees obscured the afternoon sun, creating a gloomy, eerily silent scene. The wind whistled through the broken windows, sounding like the lament of the old house. Nathan felt excited, but also had an inexplicable shiver. He was a very confident person, but this place truly triggered a hidden fear within him, a fear he had never experienced before. He began to explore the house, room by room. Old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs, torn curtains hanging like funeral shrouds. He found old photographs, children's toys, personal belongings left behind, as if its owner had just left. Nathan felt an unusual presence in the house, a feeling of being watched, especially when he was alone in the dark rooms. The first few days passed in terrifying silence. Nathan spent his time documenting his findings, taking photos, and trying to learn about the house's history. But then, strange things began to appear, very small, very subtle, but enough to catch his attention. Occasionally, when he was alone, he would hear small sounds, very faint, like slow footsteps on the wooden floor upstairs, or whispers somewhere in the house. He would stop, listen, but everything would be silent. Once, he left his lighter on the table, but when he returned, it was neatly placed on the windowsill. Nathan told himself it was just his imagination, or that the house was too old, causing strange sounds and phenomena. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger within him, especially when night fell. An unusual chill often enveloped the house. Sometimes he felt the temperature drop suddenly at certain points, as if an invisible cold draft was passing through. Strange dreams also began to haunt him, repeating vague images of a woman with long hair, her face obscured, standing silently in the corner of the room, staring at him. He woke up, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, and it took a long time for him to fall back asleep. Nathan began to doubt himself, whether he was just too stressed, or if the house was truly haunted. The initial signs gradually became clearer and more terrifying. Nathan began to frequently see dark shadows flitting past the corner of his eye, especially when he walked down the dark hallway, or when he was alone in the living room. He would spin around, but there was nothing, just the deafening silence and the old walls. Once, he was reviewing the photos he had taken, when he suddenly heard a very clear whisper, as if someone was calling his name. Nathan? He dropped his camera, his heart pounding like a drum. He looked around. There was no one, only the wind whistling through the slightly open window. Objects in the house also began to move inexplicably. A vase placed on the old fireplace suddenly shattered to the floor, without any reason. Nathan stood frozen, looking at the broken glass, and felt a chill run down his spine. He began to sleep very little. The terrifying dreams continued to torment him, becoming clearer and clearer. He clearly saw the face of the woman in his dreams. Black, lifeless eyes, and a grotesque, distorted smile. He began to doubt himself, and doubt everything he was experiencing. The tension reached its peak when Nathan began to see even more terrifying things. One evening, as he stood in front of the large mirror in the master bedroom, he suddenly saw a reflection behind him. It was the woman from his dreams, with long, dark hair hanging loose, a pale face, and deep, hollow eyes staring at him through the mirror. Nathan screamed in terror, spinning around, but there was nothing. Only the old mirror, reflecting his own pale, terrified face. He rushed out of the bedroom, trembling uncontrollably, his heart racing. He tried to calm himself down, telling himself it was just an illusion, due to his exhaustion and stress. But the fear had already taken root in his mind. He began to avoid looking in mirrors, avoiding the dark corners of the house, and trying not to be alone for too long. He turned on all the lights in the house, but the light seemed unable to dispel the invisible darkness that enveloped the house. He felt the house was turning into a trap, and he was stuck inside. The fear prompted Nathan to delve deeper into the house's history. He recalled seeing an old wooden chest in the basement when he was exploring earlier, covered in dust and cobwebs. He decided to go down to the basement again, even though he felt an extreme sense of dread as he stepped inside. The smell of damp earth and cold air assailed his nostrils when he opened the basement door. The faint flashlight beam was just enough to illuminate the old, rotting objects. Nathan found the old wooden chest, covered in dust. He opened it. Inside were old, decaying objects, rotting clothes, and a faded leather-bound journal. The journal was written in shaky handwriting, but clearly by a woman named Eleanor, the last owner of this house in the 1960s. Eleanor had lived a lonely life, and she was haunted by the grief of losing her child, a baby who had died prematurely right in this house. The last journal entries recorded Eleanor's descent into madness. She had tried everything to bring her child back, even resorting to dark magic rituals, using this very house as the site for the rituals. The very last page, written in shaky handwriting, had only one sentence: "My child will never leave, and anyone who sets foot here will suffer my pain forever." As Nathan read that, a chilling cold ran down his spine, and he felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing his throat. He realized that the haunting spirit of this house was not Eleanor, but the child, trapped, held back by the mother's desperate love. And that curse was now aimed at him. The horror reached its peak when Nathan returned to his old bedroom, where he had been sleeping for the past few days. He felt the room become unusually cold, and a strange sweet scent, like wild daisies, wafted through the air. He looked around, and saw the old closet door slightly ajar. Nathan knew he had closed it tightly before going down to the basement. He approached the door, and suddenly heard a faint cry, like a child's cry, coming from inside the closet. Nathan's hair stood on end, his heart pounding like a drum. He slowly opened the closet door wider, and saw nothing but a dark, empty space inside. But the crying continued, and he felt an icy cold breath on his face, as if a child was standing right in front of him. "Mommy!" A faint child's voice echoed, deep, haunting, yet with a strange familiarity. Nathan backed away, collapsing to the floor. He clearly saw a small, blurred figure, standing in the closet, black, lifeless eyes staring straight at him. It was the spirit of the child, trying to communicate, or worse, trying to pull him into its world. Nathan tried to scream, but no sound came out, as if an invisible hand was squeezing his throat. He felt a chilling current pass through his body, as if something was trying to possess him, to enter him. Nathan woke up, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, but his eyes were still filled with panic. He didn't know if it was a dream or reality, But the obsession with Eleanor and the child had deeply embedded itself in his mind, unable to be erased. He couldn't stay in that house for another second. He quickly packed his belongings, leaving behind everything he couldn't carry, rushing out of the house without a single glance back. Nathan left Colorado. He moved to another city, trying to start a new life. But no matter where he was, the fear still clung to him. He couldn't sleep soundly. The dreams of the child, of his great-grandfather's old house, and of the mother's curse tormented him every night. The child's small face with lifeless eyes kept appearing in his mind. He always felt as if someone was watching him, no matter where he was. Every time night fell, he felt an icy chill envelop him, and the faint crying of a child kept echoing in his ears. That terrifying summer vacation had turned into an eternal haunting in Nathan's life. He knew that, no matter where he went, the spirit of the child would always be there. A child ghost trapped by her mother's desperate love, waiting for the next victim. And perhaps, he would forever be a part of that terrifying story. It was the summer of 2023. In a secluded forest area of Washington state, where tall pine trees hid in the early morning mist. The Miller family, consisting of parents David and Sarah, and their two young children Maya, 8 years old, and Leo, 5 years old, were excitedly preparing for a 3-day summer camping trip. They had just moved into an older, more spacious house, not far from this forest. The house looked ordinary, but was quite rundown, with peeling paint and creaking wooden doors that groaned with every gust of wind. David, a busy architect, always felt work pressure, while Sarah, a primary school teacher, was prone to excessive worry for her children. This trip was an opportunity for the whole family to relax, escaping their daily stresses. As soon as they arrived at the campsite, a musty smell, mixed with the scent of forest earth and dry leaves, assailed their nostrils. The air in the forest was much colder than outside, despite it being summer, and the dense tree canopies blocked the sunlight, creating a gloomy, eerily silent scene. The Miller family pitched their tent near a small stream. The gentle sound of flowing water was soothing. But from the very first night, strange things began. Maya, the older daughter, started talking about strange noises she heard from deep within the forest, like someone whispering, or the rustling of dry leaves, even though there was no wind. David and Sarah tried to reassure her, thinking it was just the sounds of wild animals. However, a sense of unease had begun to creep into Sarah's heart. She had a tendency to overworry, and her intuition told her that something was wrong. On the first night, the whole family lay in the tent, the chirping of crickets and the hoot of an owl from afar. Sarah couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by Maya's words. She felt a very clear sensation of being watched, as if someone was standing just outside the tent, staring at them. Occasionally, she would hear very faint footsteps, circling outside the tent, but when she held her breath to listen, everything would be silent. Around midnight, the temperature inside the tent suddenly dropped significantly. An icy chill pierced through the thin tent fabric, making Sarah shiver. She looked at David. He was fast asleep. She gently turned to Maya and Leo. They were also sound asleep. Sarah tried to calm herself down, telling herself it was just the sudden change in weather in the forest. But then, she heard a very faint whisper, almost inaudible, right next to her ear. "We're not alone." Sarah curled up, tightly shut her eyes, pretending to be asleep. She felt an overwhelming fear surging within her. She sensed the presence of something invisible, very close to her, its icy breath on her face. She knew that these were not the sounds of wild animals, nor was it her imagination. Something unusual was happening in this forest. On the second day of the camping trip, the atmosphere remained heavy and gloomy. Maya and Leo seemed tired and less talkative than usual. Sarah tried to maintain a calm facade, but the anxiety in her heart grew. As they were walking around the campsite, Maya suddenly stopped in front of a small trail, hidden by overgrown bushes. "Mommy, I hear voices from here," Maya said, her child's voice trembling. David tried to pull the child away, but Sarah was drawn by an irresistible curiosity. She felt a sudden icy chill emanating from that trail. Sarah, along with David and the children, followed the trail. The deeper they went, the denser the trees became, blocking out the sunlight. The smell of damp earth and old moss assailed their nostrils, making her feel uncomfortable. After they had walked quite a distance, they saw an old, abandoned house, hidden behind thick trees. The house was made of wood, already rotting, with parts of the roof collapsed, and broken windows like empty eye sockets. A gloomy, terrifying aura enveloped the house. Immediately, Sarah felt an overwhelming fear. She had a feeling as if this house was calling her name, drawing her closer. Sarah felt a strange urge to go inside the house. David initially objected, but seeing his wife's determination, he reluctantly agreed, instructing the children to stay outside with him. Sarah stepped into the house. The rotting wooden floorboards creaked under her feet. The smell of dampness and dust assailed her nostrils. Weak light filtered through the gaps in the roof and the broken windows, just enough to illuminate old objects, covered in cobwebs. She walked through each room, feeling a heavy, gloomy presence pervading the space. In the living room, she saw an old, torn rug, and a rotting wooden rocking chair. Her gaze stopped at an old fireplace, with a large black stain on the wall, as if a fire had occurred there. When she reached the last room, which seemed to be a bedroom, she saw an old, dusty child's crib, placed in the corner of the room. Right next to the crib, on the floor, she saw a faded leather-bound journal, left behind. Sarah picked up the journal, her heart pounding. She opened it. The pages were yellowed, but the handwriting was still legible. It was the journal of a woman named Abigail, the former owner of this house, from the 1970s. The last entries in the journal recounted a horrifying tragedy. Abigail had lost her young daughter, Lily, in a mysterious fire right in this house. She wrote about her extreme grief and her desire to be reunited with her daughter, even mentioning strange rituals to bring her daughter back. As Sarah read that, an icy chill ran down her spine, and she felt as if someone was standing right behind her. She spun around and saw a female figure with long, disheveled hair, her face obscured by shadow, standing right in the middle of the room, staring at her. Sarah screamed in terror, dropping the journal. She looked closer and saw the woman's eyes, black, lifeless, and a grotesque, distorted smile. It was Abigail, the spirit of the mother trapped in this house. Abigail didn't say a word, just slowly approached Sarah, her lifeless eyes fixed on her. Sarah backed away step by step, trying to get out of the room. She felt an icy chill pierce through her, as if something was trying to possess her, to enter her. The extreme fear made her lose her reason. She felt Abigail's voice echoing in her head. "Lily, you will never leave me. I will keep you here forever." Sarah knew that Abigail could not accept the death of her daughter, and her spirit was still here, trapped in grief and madness. And now, she was looking for a new mother for Lily. Or worse, she wanted to drag Sarah into her obsession. Sarah tried to run out of the house, but she felt as if an invisible wall was blocking her. She turned around and saw Abigail's ghost standing right behind her, her lifeless eyes staring at her. Sarah collapsed to the floor, no longer having the strength to resist. Suddenly, from the direction of the bedroom, a faint child's cry echoed. "Mommy, save me." Sarah looked towards it and saw a small, blurred figure standing next to the old crib. It was Lily, the spirit of the child trapped, unable to find peace. Sarah felt a surge of sorrow within her. She realized that not only was Abigail haunted, but Lily was also suffering, imprisoned in this very house by her mother's obsession. Abigail turned around, looking towards Lily, her eyes briefly showing a hint of tenderness, but then quickly vanished, replaced by madness and possession. Abigail reached out her hand towards Lily, as if to pull the child closer. Sarah understood that Abigail was trying to keep Lily here, not allowing the child to rest in peace. She knew she had to do something, not only to save herself, but also to free Lily's tiny soul. Sarah didn't know where she found the strength. She sprang up, rushed towards the crib, trying to touch Lily's figure. As her hand touched the air where Lily stood, an icy current ran through her entire body, and she felt an intense pain. Abigail's ghost let out an angry roar, like a wounded wild animal, lunging towards Sarah. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the attack. But then, she felt a small, cold hand gently touch hers. When she opened her eyes, Lily's figure was standing right in front of her. The child's eyes no longer lifeless, but gleaming with a ray of hope. Lily smiled faintly, an innocent smile, but full of sorrow. Immediately after, both Lily's and Abigail's figures vanished into thin air, leaving only the deafening silence and the musty smell of the house. Sarah rushed out of the house, running frantically towards the outside. David and the children were waiting, looking at her with worried eyes. Sarah didn't say a word, just hastily pulled the children into the car, and sped wildly away from that forest, without a single glance back. The Miller family's summer vacation ended in horror. Sarah never returned to that forest, or that old house again. But no matter where she was, she could not escape the haunting. She often dreamed of Lily, seeing the child's small face smiling in sorrow, and the child's faint cries kept echoing in her head. She knew that, even though Lily's spirit had been freed, the fear and the haunting images of that house, and of that mad mother, would forever cling to her, turning what was supposed to be a relaxing summer vacation into an eternal nightmare.